We've had two events in the last 5 years that I believe signal the beginning of a very, very long, dangerous, and opportunistic endgame for the Industrial Revolution made out of fossil fuels. Let me take you back to the first event, July 2008. You remember that month? Crude oil hit $147 a barrel on world markets, and when that happened, all the prices across the global supply chain went through the roof. Everything in this civilization is made out of fossil fuels or moved by them. Fertilizers, pesticides, all of our construction materials, pharmaceutical products, synthetic fibers, it's all made out of fossil fuels. Power, transport, heat, and light. We've created a great and rather dangerous short-lived civilization based on digging up the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era. It's really all about that. You know, I got it just as an aside. You know, I often wonder if we make it through this moment. I mean, I have my serious doubts, really, which is probably not a nice thing to say to all the young people here, but if we make it, I wonder what future generations of our species will think of us maybe 300,000 years from now. All the monuments will be gone. The only record they will have that we were here is they're going to have our CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide footprint square in the geological record. They're going to say, oh yeah, back then they were the oil people. We had the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. They lived off fossil fuels and they almost destroyed the planet in the process. When oil started to go over $80 a barrel in 2007, all the other prices started going up. At 120 a barrel, we had food riots in 22 countries because this afternoon we've got 40% of the human race living on under $2 a day. And when the price of wheat, barley, rice, and rye were doubling, tripling, and actually trebling, we had 1 billion people in harm's way. The UN, if you remember, panicked. They said, we've got an alert here. How do we deal with this? At 147 a barrel for Brent crude, everyone stopped buying. Prices were too high in the stores. The entire global economy shut down in July 2008. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial markets 60 days later was the aftershock. We couldn't maintain that fictional credit-ridden, debt-ridden economy when the real economy shut down. Our world leaders are still dealing with the aftershock. No one wants to actually address the earthquake because then we'd have to ask some soul-searching questions about the reorganization of civilization. This is an endgame. We now know in the business community, and this is maybe a good measuring, we actually know how far we can globalize the world based on fossil fuels and the technologies embedded with them. It's about, the zone is between 120 and 150 a barrel. When it gets into that zone, prices go up and we get shut down in the economy. The reason we've hit this end game is we now have two milestones. Peak oil per capita, 1979. Global peak oil, 2006. In 1979, had we distributed all the oil reserves we had at that moment in time to everyone alive on the planet at that moment and shared them, that's actually the most oil any person could have. We found more oil since then, but population's risen a lot faster. So if we distribute all the known oil reserves we have now to 7 billion people, there's less per person to go around. So when China and India brought a third of the human race into the game in the sunset of a second industrial revolution at a 9, 10, 11, and 12% growth rate over 15 years, just too much aggregate demand against the supply of oil reserves. Oil prices go up, other prices go up, shut down. The proof's in the pudding. In 2009, oil went down to 30 a barrel. And of course, the good news is the bad news. It means there's no economic activity. As soon as we started to replenish inventories, oil prices went up and they hit a shorter peak of 123 a barrel in the first quarter of 2012. Always look to Unilever and Colgate-Palmolive if you want to know what's going on. The big consumer product companies, they issued their quarterly for the first quarter of 2012. They said profits are down to the shareholders because the price of oil went up. We had to embed that in all our products. Purchasing power is slowing down. We are in a second shutdown right now. These are 5-year cycles of growth, shutdown, replenish inventory, growth, shutdown. There is no way to get through this. Once we get in that zone of 123 to 147 a barrel, it goes down again. We have other fossil fuels. We have tar sands in Canada, shale gas in the U.S. and around the world, heavy oil in Venezuela, coal. Well, let me deal with tar sand and shale gas for a moment. The only reason we are in these energies, we've known about them for a long time, is because the high price of crude oil is setting the benchmark for going to the more difficult energies. It's much more costly and difficult to get oil out of rock and sands than out of an oil well gushing out of the ground in Saudi Arabia. Tar sands is not competitive under 80 a barrel. And we used to think that price was prohibitive for oil. As to shale gas, I'm looking at the studies. It apparently, I'm not sure yet, it looks like we have a bubble here. I guess it's Chesapeake is in real trouble, the big company. They've overinvested, overhyped. The energy company has gotten into it, the banks. And from what we're seeing, we're not sure yet, but some studies are showing that these shale gas deposits, what they're doing is they're projecting the amount of gas based on the sweet spots. And there's only a few sweet spots in every deposit. And you know how long it takes to get the gas out of the sweet spots? About 18 months. So now the new studies are beginning to suggest, we don't know yet, beginning to suggest a big bubble, overhyped how much reserves. And even then, if you put them on world markets, it's fairly irrelevant. This leads us to the second event. We have these other fossil fuels, and even though gas burns better, a little less CO2, they're still emitting CO2. The second event is December 2009, Copenhagen. 192 heads of state show up there to address the entropy bill for the industrial age. How many engineers do I have here? Good. You know you cannot escape the second law of thermodynamics, right? Should tell the economists that. They don't study thermodynamics. So that's why I don't know anything about economics. We'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, this is not a metaphor. We have too much spent entropy. That CO2 is spent energy. It's up in the atmosphere. And really, the long and short of it is we can't get enough of the sun's heat back off the earth. How bad is it? It's actually right now terrifying.